We call it Project Synapse, which I always follow with the line, AI in action. It started when Marcel Gagné and I met. Marcel is a bit of a legend in the open source community. Like me, he's a long-term IT veteran. He's authored a number of books. He has a blog and all of that. But most of you might know him from a 10-year or more stint in a column called Cooking with Linux. I think it was in Linux Magazine. Now, while many of you might know me as the host of #Trending, like Marcel, I'm also an author. I've written for a number of technology journals, but I've been in IT for 40 years. I spent a lot of that time as a strategic IT consultant and ended up heading up an international consulting practice, the group that gave us portfolio management and many of the concepts that started to evolve around getting outcomes from information technology. One of the things I missed most about that practice was that I could discuss with a group of people that were some of the best IT minds anywhere. We'd discuss, we'd debate, we'd argue, we'd test ideas. And we knew we were doing something that was on the forefront of IT and something that would affect it for years to come. I've kept up some of the publishing, as you know. I've returned to doing some consulting, though, and this time in the world of AI. In reality, I'd been working with AI long before ChatGPT. I'm more than a little obsessed. So Marcel and I met a few times and found that we were both passionate about this. We shared a lot of what we're thinking and talking about. And after being in IT for 40 years, if you find a great idea that excites you, go with it. And then a third person joined our group, John Pinard, a long-term IT veteran. And John has a day job, but he joins us weekly for our discussions. His long-term practical experience, his knowledge of cybersecurity, and his curiosity and desire to, like Marcel and I, learn new things made him a perfect fit for our group. We've been meeting once a week for discussion, both planned and unplanned. We bring ideas to explore, and true to the eat your own dog food mentality, we record the conversations, initially so we could see how AI would analyze them. We've also planned to share these discussions, and I wasn't sure that the podcast was the right spot, but as I was going over this recording, I thought it might be worth sharing at least a couple of these discussions with our audience. With ChatGPT getting to be about 2 years old, we've been reflecting on where we'd come from and where AI was going to take us. And as it turned out, just before this, John got laryngitis. So the first voice you'll hear is Marcel. John pipes up only once. And I think you know my voice.
Oh, listen, it's been almost 2 years since ChatGPT made the scene. November 30th, 2022 was the big day when the world was introduced to ChatGPT. And what's really amazing about that is it feels like a lot longer, doesn't it?
I can't believe how long it feels like it's been. The incredible intensity. You talk about how long I've been in IT and who cares, but the amount of time that I feel has accelerated in the past 2 years has been incredible. The first time I sat in front of a computer and typed in some words to this thing, I went, oh, things are going to change. But I never envisioned that it would be this fast or this much. Even there, I'm an incredible optimist, but I couldn't believe we'd come this far this fast.
Yeah, I'm admittedly a techno-optimist. I am one of the people that thinks that technology has the power to make the world a better place. I'm definitely not a doomer. The amount of change that we've seen in those 2 years, I started tracing this back with GPT-2. I wrote a column showing people how to set up an environment on their PCs to run GPT-2. At the time, I thought this is actually pretty impressive, but it's got a lot of problems. A couple of years after that, ChatGPT makes the scene. And I have to admit, I have seen a lot of technology come and go. When I first sat down in front of ChatGPT and asked questions, told it to make a haiku about whatever, the whole bit, I was utterly blown away. And I couldn't stop telling people about it. Like everybody I ran into, hey, have you tried ChatGPT yet? Hey, have you checked this out? Check this out. I've got this, and showing them on my phone or a browser. I don't remember a time where I was blown away by technology quite to the degree that I was on that day. So.
Yeah. And one of the curious things was, and I've talked about this before, this is something lacking in education. In the early days, I remember we built our own PCs.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
We learned how to communicate with a machine in numeric talk, and then found that speaking language like COBOL was something. So we understood the underpinnings of it. This was another fortunate time for me because for an IT guy, everybody know I was a musician. I wandered into a computer room because everybody in those days was a mathematician or a musician. That's how I got started. Somebody said, pull the paper off that thing, because we would play in the computer rooms because they were air conditioned. And in Toronto, if anybody's ever lived in Toronto in the summer, if you're broke and you live in a little slum, we'd play over the night shifts when we weren't playing gigs in clubs and things like that. That's how I started in IT, the accidental IT career. But I have a degree in English, specifically in linguistics and literature, as well as psychology, which is really crazy. The first time, the stuff we used to do in linguistics, parsing language, taking it apart, and you start to realize that's what that first model was doing. It was making it a great prediction of what the next half word was going to be. And that's essential. So I was back again where I understood the underpinnings of it. But now, as you see it work, you realize that is far more complex than you can possibly imagine. You lose track of it really quickly. Even in those early models that couldn't do much in the way of math, they were really limited. They had a lot more hallucinations, although I think most of the hallucinations in the early stages were people jailbreaking.
People always, there's always some joker that wants to push the envelope and say, it's like that old thing when you're a kid, I made you say underwear.
Yep.
Hey, I think it's basically at the same level now. I grant you that there are other potentially nefarious reasons behind wanting to jailbreak a system, but not necessarily in those early days, as you put it. But here's the thing, Jim. The idea of the model not being able to do math did not stop people from being impressed. The reason I believe that's the case is, although we all appreciate that there are people that are really good at math, I like to think I'm reasonably good at it. I'm nowhere near as good at it as my wife and my son. They're math wizards. I'm really good. I'm not anywhere in that ballpark. Because math isn't something that we see every moment of every day. Communication, however, is everything. We talk to each other constantly. We listen to the radio or television or podcasts. Communication is just one of those magical things. I am an AI language model and I'm not programmed to have emotions, but it's really hard not to think of it as another person has just entered the room, a foreigner from some land we didn't know existed.
Exactly. When I first started working, I joked that there were mostly musicians and mathematicians around. I survived because I could understand patterns, not because I was the best mathematician. Now, though, we've done a complete reversal. Those people who understand,
yes, that's very true,
and how to communicate are going to be advantaged in this world.
That's an interesting point. Lately, I have talked about the idea that we've forgotten how to talk to each other since the pandemic started, okay? Because now everybody's on the other side of a microphone. We're not in person. Granted, we've got Zoom calls and what we're doing right now on Riverside, but you miss a lot of those visual cues, those little microsaccades and motions that we pick up on when we're in person with other people. We don't notice that to the same extent when we're sitting on the other side of a microphone. So in some ways, the pandemic robbed a lot of us to some degree of the ability to just chat, just talk for no other reason, not to achieve anything, but just to talk. So all of a sudden, when you bring up these models for the first time, especially now that we've got things like voice mode in these models, we're just talking to somebody on the other side. In that respect, we blew the Turing test a couple of years back. But now that we can actually talk to the models, you realize how amazing and difficult it is to have a conversation. The appreciation for what the model is actually able to do, especially when you use, like I said, the advanced voice mode or even Gemini's. I don't know if they call it advanced voice mode, but it's basically the same thing as ChatGPT. You realize that there's something incredibly magical about the fact that this alien intelligence can have an actual conversation with back and forth.
Yeah. And so that was the intrigue. Now, what happened with it, and I'll let you disagree with me or agree with me on this, is it just got bigger. They did a couple of things. They patched up the math because you can do that. And the beauty of anybody who understands OpenAI, the wonderful thing it can do is function calls. So it can substitute some computer logic in there. So it fixed up the math, did some training to fix those things. Great, wonderful. And basically just got bigger and bigger. Now, an interesting thing happens because we have this thing that can talk to you. It can do some amazing things. It can write a poem and all that sort of stuff, essentially constructing based on probabilities what the best next word is in a sentence. When you take it to a huge extreme and you start to construct the database, and the database is now not constructed with data like we understand it, it's vectors. It's a different world. And you get to this whole thing and I was studying chaos theories for about a decade, because anybody who's ever gotten into this, it's quite interesting. What happens when things get really big is you start to get emergent behavior. Where we've gotten to at this point with those models is we may or may not understand them. There are some severe geniuses out there who might possibly understand a part of it, but we no longer understand what they're doing. And that's a fair statement. 2 years from where we started, we have these things that are incredibly powerful. They can carry on the Turing test. For those of anybody who's listening to this and you don't know what the Turing test is, it was basically Turing, I think he really invented Alan Turing. And he said that his early test about artificial intelligence was, if you are sitting in another room and you can't tell that it's a computer, it's passed the Turing test. It is now more or less human.
Obviously, Alan Turing did not call it the Turing test. He called it the imitation game.
We've all called it the Turing test. Alan didn't. He wasn't like, I'll say love, second law, and all this. He wasn't quite as egotistical as we are. Yeah. So he has the imitation game. Thank you. So that got passed a long time ago. Whether it was and everybody said it got passed. ELIZA in 1964, I think it was the first rule-driven computer that
1970. You're talking ELIZA 1970.
Is it 1970 for ELIZA? Yeah.
But it was 1970.
We should actually ask ChatGPT because God knows Alexa won't be able to tell you. I wonder if Alexa can. Hold up. Alexa, when was ELIZA, the computer simulation, put in place?
From Zapier.com. ELIZA 1961 was an early chatbot that answered people with human-sounding responses.
1961.
Fish.
I was close. I was closer with 64. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, so we go all the way up. We have AI winter when everybody.
Yes.
They didn't have enough processing power. I think it was largely processing power.
We didn't have a lot of the pieces in place. We had the beginnings of neural networks, but we believed that we could teach the things by decision trees. It's, if I find myself at a stop sign, what do I do? So we believed at that point that it was all decision trees. And it wasn't until this great attention is everything, a paper came out, that we really started to take giant leaps forward.
But a great attention.
Before that, it was all
2017, wasn't it? Somewhere around there. Yeah. We'd had Watson.
Let's not ask Siri. Okay.
Okay. No, but we had Watson came in, and Watson was won at Jeopardy. It could talk. It could answer questions. It was a great thing, as I said. So people at IBM hadn't done shit since, but that was a huge, colossal move forward. And I joke about this, but I think there's a reason why Watson hasn't advanced. It has at IBM. It's doing things at IBM, but it hasn't advanced the way it would have, because it immediately became a legacy architecture. It was really the great attention, that idea of transformers, that idea that really threw things into high speed. And so it was a Google invention, wasn't it?
That was definitely Google. Absolutely. The transformer architecture is a Google thing. With all the jokes that we can make about where Google is and how the fact they seem to be trailing OpenAI on these things, and possibly even Anthropic for that matter. We haven't even mentioned Anthropic and all the other companies working in this. Meta is now a powerhouse of artificial intelligence technology as well. The people who walked into this originally, but I feel Google was there at the beginning of this revolution. And by revolution, I mean of the current types of models that we've got right now. Google has such incredibly deep pockets, and they basically own the web. They don't necessarily financially own it, but they helped create all of these architectures by building the first massive database of all the world's information. OpenAI, Anthropic, and all these other companies have taken advantage of the fact that Google was there first, and Google made all of this massive amounts of data available to them.
We talk about why technology takes off. And you say, why didn't it happen here? Why didn't it happen there? You say processing power, the amount of data, the amount of data you need for these models. There's this amazing thing that happens when these trends converge. And I think they did about 2 or 3 years ago. But Google still made the first advances. And this is why in AI, whether it was DeepMind or Google, learning to win at chess was an easy thing for an AI. Learning to play Jeopardy is actually relatively easy by today's standards. Learning to play Go, a strategy where there are literally more combinations than there are stars in the universe. So you can have so many different combinations of strategy in there. How do you win at that? It plays against itself and keeps playing and playing till it wins. And this is an important point, because as we get past the model we have now and start to get into a reasoning AI, I think that's the pivot point we're at right now. This
Yes, we are.
initial
Absolutely.
idea that an AI can improve itself is really a Google invention, not an OpenAI invention. And I think that's OpenAI was at the right place to take a lot of the stuff that Google had developed. And I think it was started, right? It was with Elon Musk and Sam Altman. Elon Musk funded
Sam Altman and Ilya Sutskever.
It was funded to keep Google from owning AI and might almost succeed.
Thing that I hate to say this because it's one of those things that we want to beat companies up about. And in some ways, rightly so. But it was the sheer audacity of Altman and company to just drop this into the world. Because when GPT-1 first came out, they talked about it as this interesting development in artificial intelligence. And then they talked about GPT-2 and they said this new model with, and I don't remember what the number of parameters was at the time, but whatever the number of parameters was, they said this new model is too dangerous to release into the world. So what we're going to do, and then, do you remember this? Do you remember this?
Yeah, I know.
They said it's too dangerous.
Altman keeps dissing these early models. Amazing.
So it's too dangerous to release into the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to make them available to developers to help us create this moral AIs. And then November 30th, 2022, here's ChatGPT, which is like orders of magnitude beyond anything that GPT-2 was, which was too dangerous to release into the world. So the audacity of saying something like that a couple of years before and then releasing something like ChatGPT into the world, making it so that basically anyone on the planet who has an internet connection can now experiment and work with this thing. This is introducing crack into a disadvantaged neighborhood or something like that. Let me give you a taste of this new intelligence, of what it can do for you. And at that point, the barn doors are so wide open that any of these talks about creating a safe AI or worrying about whether it was too dangerous to do any of these things has gone out the window.
I think this is, in essence, understanding where we are. A promoter, and I believe Altman is purely a promoter. Everybody send me the hate mail now, but he is a Silicon Valley promoter, and he does it really well. He got a hold of a bright guy, Ilya Sutskever, and had a team of people, somehow got crazed Elon Musk to throw some money into it. And
I don't think Elon was totally crazy yet at that point. I think the edge.
Yeah, I think the crazy came later. But the whole idea was the brashness of this. We're going to take this thing we shouldn't release and we're going to run the crap out of it. And I think that's where we got to. And you can like or dislike Sam Altman, but you have to understand who he is. He's a promoter, and he's going to keep promoting this stuff and keep it moving forward. And maybe you need that. Maybe that's the essence of a capitalist market or the Silicon Valley invention. He's more promoter than anything. So you're going to find he'll keep driving this thing way beyond the limits of where it can go. The essence of this is anybody who thinks that we're going to have a safe AI because of Sam Altman needs to get their head read. And for that matter, any of the other major players. Claude AI comes the closest. You look at how they're founded on that whole idea, and they read their epistle on their website.
Constitutional AI and all that.
I think they actually believe this, but I don't know whether in the same way that once you built the AI model to be so big, the behavior is emergent and out of our control. Once you get AI out into the market like this, it's too big and out of our control.
Absolutely. And I honestly, genuinely feel like this has been a net positive. And we've talked for a long time in science. If you're a fan of science fiction, we've talked for a long time about the idea, what would it be like if an alien civilization landed, one that was more advanced than us, far more intelligent than we are? How would we navigate this world with this intelligence? This intelligence is smart enough that it took a few months in orbit watching us from above, learned all of the languages on Earth, learned everything there was to learn about human culture, read everything that was in Wikipedia on the internet and so forth. And then one day landed their spaceships in the middle of Central Park or whatever, or Victoria Park, take your pick, and stepped out and said, "Hi, we're from Proxima Centauri and we bring our superior intelligence and technology to your world." This is exactly what's happened, except we built the alien intelligence and it has landed. We can argue all we want about whether or not this thing is actually intelligent or sentient. I'm not even going there. but there is a kind of intelligence that is way beyond any human being on the planet.
Jeffrey Hinton said the best. I thought I understood AI because I understood linguistics and I knew its underpinnings. Like I said, once you get to a certain point, it becomes not understandable. Its behavior is emergent and different. Hinton said this, I think 2 years ago. He said, I've started to think about it not as human intelligence. And this is what everybody's talking about. When does we get to artificial or general intelligence? When does it be like a human? The answer is never, if you believe Hinton.
Agreed.
It's a foreign intelligence. So as much as you like to dive into science fiction, that's one of the best ways to think about AI. It's an alien intelligence. It doesn't think the same way we do. That doesn't mean it can't write poetry. That doesn't mean it can't write songs. That doesn't mean it can't do these things, but it is a different type of intelligence. That's a key point. The big argument now, 2 years later, is reasoning AI. That's really the next step. We've already found out that it can write language. They've fixed the math. It can now do math at the PhD level. And I always find this really funny though. AI can't do math at high school level. 90% of the population can't do math at the high school level. 90% of the population don't know where an apostrophe goes. It was ahead of us a long time ago.
Get like an English major there.
Now it is operating mathematically at the PhD level. Those barriers have been crossed. Our aim is to put this in practical usage. We look at the error rate. You can't complain about it not being able to do English if you can't spell or do grammar. You can't complain about it not being able to do math if it does math better than the average person. Hallucinating in a world where, I got to tell you, read the internet and find out most of the human population is hallucinating right now. Yeah. So the fact that it doesn't get things right or it says some things that are not true makes it qualified to be president of the United States. It's talking about alien intelligence there for a second. Now, the question is, how does that evolve? And that's where I'm starting to watch. And this is where we go 2 years from now. We've done some of the things we think we could do in business. If you wanted to put this into business, I know you use it all the time. John, you're using AI all the time. I use it constantly.
Ethan Mollick, co-intelligence.
Yeah, Ethan Mollick. Yeah, co-intelligence. Yeah. And his advice was use it every day. Use it in everything you do.
Use it for everything. Yes.
And I think there's a lot of people who are doing that and have had some benefits, mostly in things that involve language. But people have made a lot of strides in terms of becoming more efficient. I couldn't do all the stuff we're doing in publishing. We were talking before this about being able to edit your own stuff. I don't have time. And yet at the same time, most Grammarly is not editing for me. I got this friend, who used to be my wife, honestly, and she's probably happy because she hates this stuff, but she'll read something I've written and say, did you actually reread this? So I'll introduce all kinds of mistakes. Just taking that out of my life, being able to run it by and say, tell me what mistakes you think I made is a big improvement in productivity.
You mentioned the idea of you can't do this and so forth. Are you familiar with Hans Moravec? He was a pioneer in robotics, artificial intelligence as well, but in robotics. He wrote a book called Mind Children, which I referenced in a blog post that I did last week. And the book, he speculates on a future time where, the robots that we create, and he tends to think in terms of robots because this way pre-large language models and stuff like that. He thinks of them as successors to humanity, as the next step in human evolution. So definitely a kind of alien intelligence, but an intelligence that we're creating. The reason I mentioned Moravec is he had this model that he called a rising tide of intelligence or technological capabilities. But artificial intelligence or a robot will never be able to do this. Oh, it did this. The tide rises a little bit more. And of course, there are all these landscapes, mountaintops and stuff like that. We'll never be able to play chess. Oh, that's been passed. It can't be intelligent until it's able to play Go. Okay, we passed. Okay, playing Go is one thing, but mastering human communication is another thing. Oh, it won't be able to do anything until it's able to do complex mathematics. That tide is rising all the time, but eventually you reach top of Mount Everest. Technically speaking, I believe K2 is the highest peak in the world. But you get the idea. At some point, you reach the highest peak and you have surpassed that. The only thing left to us at that point is so-called sentience, which I don't like.
What I'm getting at is it doesn't matter.
Sentience I agree with you.
Does not matter. And let's go back to Alan Turing's imitation game. And I think I don't think anybody's going to say they're smarter than Alan Turing. Turing's imitation game still survives in this idea that it doesn't matter how it gets there. It says, can it behave? Can it do things that would make you think it was human. Make decisions. Can it move? Can it influence its world? Can it learn? And that's the one that we're going against right now. Can it learn? The people who are naysayers, there's a great old MASH episode. So if anybody ever listening to this, they're really old. No, yeah. So this guy, and they spent a whole episode on one joke. And that was the joke of this guy meets a ringmaster in a circus. The circus ringmaster says to him, "What do you do?" The guy puts his hands under his armpits, flaps his arms like mad, goes up, flies around the tent, comes down, does a perfect 3-point landing right in front of the ringmaster. The ringmaster says, "Bird impressions? That's all you do? Bird impressions?" That's how I feel about most of the people who are in denial about AI. There's, as you said it, no matter what it doesn't matter because its intelligence is different. The question is, can it learn and improve itself? And I will submit to you now that we're on the edge of that. Once you can do that, you can find your errors. Once you can do that, you can deal with a lot of the things that may hold AI back. What's holding it back from business right now? We're all using it as a tool wherever we can. You always have to have a human intervening. Can't write code well enough because a human has to look at it. We're in the augmented stage right now. But you could still do a lot with it. Companies that aren't are crazy. If you're not using it to its full extent, you're crazy. It's like somebody comes up to your door and says, "I've got a machine that can do all that stuff." We're not going to do that because it might make a mistake. And I've been through this. Somebody said, "If it checks 1,000 documents and it makes a mistake, what are we going to do?" If you ask me to check 1,000 documents, I'm going to make a mistake.
But you're going to make more mistakes, in fact.
I'm probably going to make more mistakes. And the same thing, even in medicine right now, I'm looking at this, and this is a serious piece. And I don't want to be a downer on this, but my nephew is going to die of cancer because they missed a diagnosis. Not because a machine missed the diagnosis, but because he couldn't get in for a test fast enough because they don't have enough people. He would have taken his chances of 1 in 10,000 being wrong if he could have gotten that test faster. And we could be doing this now. We'd be solving a radiology backlog. fMRIs. It's a machine. And I fail to believe we can't have enough of those machines. When we don't have enough, technicians to run them. So even with what we have now, we could revolutionize medicine and a number of other areas if we had the courage to act. But that's just where we are in the augmented phase.
Right.
Once it can learn and reflect on what it's done, I would submit the old model is where, if people don't know, ChatGPT had ChatGPT 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then they broke off mysteriously. They've started an O series. They had 4O, which was, they're not great at getting a positive across, and crappy at marketing. But 4O was supposed to be
Chat come up with names.
Oh yeah, they could have done that. It would have done better. But I actually did test that one time, and it did come up with a lot better names. The O series is experimental. You can get it. I don't know if people can get it on the free version. You can definitely get it on the paid version. It's starting to build reasoning. The first O level is like the Go game. They're playing it against itself. There are some problems they have to solve. One of the things was getting a model. They're running out of data because they've ingested all the data, but finding more data to train models was there. So people were trying to solve all these problems by getting AI models to train other AI models. And that kept stalling, and for various reasons. And I think they broke it because Altman has talked about this. He's still a showman. That's why he's talking about the O2 level and where that's going to get to, and the O3 level. And he's talking about O4, and they have a roadmap to get there.
Yeah.
He's still not 100% certain, but he's got a big bet on making it to what they're calling O4, which is, I don't care whether it's the singularity. I don't care whether it's going to be smarter than anybody and be able to function in a way that it will revolutionize industry.
Everybody tosses the words AGI around, artificial general intelligence. And the idea is that it's a model that is able to perform at the PhD level across the majority of human endeavors. And to me, that's a little weird because we've already got models that are able to perform better than pretty much any PhD level human on the planet, just not necessarily in their specific field. And that's actually a key understanding that we need to get past. It's not a question of being able to do absolutely everything, but can it do most things better than you can? I'm not sure whether you and I discussed this or I sent this in Discord, but there was a news story last week where the UK has started handing out smartwatches and smart rings, or at least they're going to be, to people who want them. Don't have to have these things, but as an early warning system to take the load off the medical system. And to me, that is a brilliant use of intelligent technology that we should be fully taking advantage of. I showed the story to my wife and to Sally, and I had been saying this for 2 years, for as long as I've been wearing a smartwatch. I've been saying the government should make these things available to everybody so that you've got a constant watch on people's health. You've got an early warning system that doesn't require people to go into the doctor's office every single day. But if something is out of whack, you've got that early warning system that says, do go and visit your practitioner.
I was just going to say, I suffer from heart problems. And it was actually my Apple Watch that warned me of that. I use my Apple Watch all the time for tracking my heart, the condition. I share the information with the doctor when it's needed.
Yeah. I have to go to my doctor twice a year so he can take my blood pressure, and to find out that I really don't need blood pressure medication because I have great blood pressure at home. I have the worst case of white coat syndrome I've ever seen. Because of the shortage of doctors, I have to drive 2 hours to go to my doctor. So by the time I've gotten there, I've been in traffic for 2 hours. My blood pressure's running up. But we're still doing things in that manner. What I'm saying is right now, we could do a whole heck of a lot. I don't know what anybody else wants to call it, but it's this idea of AI can do a lot of things that humans can't do, and it can do them very well. And then there's a whole pile of simple things that humans can do that AI finds very difficult. And they're going to crack those one by one. One of the ones I picked out was a couple of scientists were running a test. And one of the things AI doesn't do well is explore. A mouse will explore its environment. AI will not. And so they started to work on that. Now, is that PhD level intelligence? No, it's the intelligence level of a mouse. And so the simple things are what it needs to do. But I think we've passed that. I watched the OpenAI development days. You got to be careful about what is demos. But I watched an AI pilot a drone. That is an incredible degree of coordination. If anybody's ever tried it, I suck at it. My son tried to get me to control this thing, watching through a camera, seeing all this stuff, controlling these levers. It takes a lot of dexterity and a lot of training. And some people may have a natural talent. It takes a lot of work to be able to do that and be able to deal with it with a drone. This thing, pop, it's gone. It flies around, it lands it perfectly. Those are the types of things that we're starting to see. Reflection, discovery, the ability to sense your environment and deal with it. Once you've got that, you have the foundations of a whole totally different level of industry. And I think that's what's coming. So I'll just recap what Altman said. He was talking about many of the things that people are doing, the businesses that they're setting up now are trying to cope with the simple things that AI can't do. Some of the areas where it has. And he said, and there's the meme of ChatGPT being the destroyer of entrepreneurs because it keeps coming on and absorbing these things that people could do. It's trying to pick up search. It's trying to put all of the people who've patched it and done things to be entrepreneurs are finding out they're getting clobbered by ChatGPT. And he said, maybe you should be taking a look at where we're going to be in X amount of time and start to picture a world where ChatGPT doesn't have these failings and start inventing your businesses to deal with that. And I thought, yeah. And I feel the same way about business. We're in the augmented stage right now. People really aren't using what's out there as effectively as they can. They're going to miss the next wave, which is understanding where it's going to go.
I'm going to tack on to that because we're talking about what the final thing is to get to AGI, for instance. Obviously, reasoning is a big deal. And in fact, people have started talking about large reasoning models as opposed to large language models, because just calling them language models doesn't really do justice to what these things are capable of doing. And Claude has gotten into the game as well recently in terms of reasoning models. I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by that. I am very often using the voice modes of these different things. And yesterday I was looking up some information for the eye issue that I was telling you about earlier. and I'm having a discussion with Gemini as opposed to ChatGPT's voice mode. I'm chatting with Gemini, and Gemini comes back and says, as far as I can tell, based on what I've got at my disposal at the moment, this information is not really existent. I said, I understand that you're working on information that you've got at your disposal. Can you do me a favor and just do a search on the internet and collect the information and come back to me with that? And Gemini says, of course, it'll take me a couple of minutes to do that. But if you're willing to hang on, I'll go and search the internet for you. About 20 seconds goes by before Gemini comes back and says, I've looked at all the various results and this is what I've come up with. And so this is new. This wasn't announced. This is what you get when you use this stuff all the time. You realize, oh my God, it can do this now. And I just offhandedly said, can you go and do a search? Yes, I can do that for you. Give me a few seconds to go take a look. Like I said, it took about 20 seconds before Gemini came back and told me what it had found on this stuff. This is amazing. ChatGPT can do that right now. The next big step, of course, and Altman is on board with this, and Claude Anthropic is on board with this, is the whole idea of agents, where you can basically turn over your PC to the artificial intelligence and it will search the web for you. It'll fill in the appropriate forms. It'll write things for you. Did you watch the Claude demo where they had to build a website and go through all the various processes to essentially create a company and build a website for it? There's an API already available. So we're getting to the point where we're starting to walk into the world of agents, where it's not just an answer machine or a research machine, but it's a machine that will do all that stuff that you don't want to do right now, looking for a flight or booking this and so on. This is where it gets really weird. While Claude was busy doing all this stuff and setting up the website, it paused to look at pictures of Yellowstone National Park.
Isn't that amazing?
It started scrolling through and looking at pictures.
Talk about human type behavior. I think I could do this with one hand tied behind my back.
I'm going to take a break and indulge in some natural beauty.
Where we are 2 years later is we have this, it's like an iceberg. People are still doing what they did two years ago. They're diddling around with little things on the edges of AI instead of integrating what it can do in businesses. We talk about agents and in the future, there are already many agents in various formats have been around. You've created them. There's had different evolutions of things that can be done, especially over the past few months, that you would be very surprised. Some of them are just experiments. Notebook LM. We may not have a podcast next time. Literally, we'll produce a podcast. I find the voices a little chipper, but when you consider that 80% of what's on YouTube right now, it's better than that. And so there's a lot of things that can't happen, but people won't find that if they don't explore, if they don't start to play around in that area and get to know it. That's why our kids will do so well with this. They'll play.
I had to jump on the Notebook LM thing for a second because the three of us were having a conversation like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And of course I said, we should record this. And of course we recorded it. So I had audio and I thought I need the audio transcript because it would be fun to take our conversation, put it in Notebook LM and have it generate a podcast of our discussion. And then I went and took a look and we had talked for an hour and a half. Oh man, there's no way I can transcribe this. I'll go and take a look at things like otter.ai. To transcribe that much information, I would have had to subscribe to the service for an entire year. I went into ChatGPT and I'm sorry, Otter, for pointing this out, but I went into ChatGPT and I said, can you help me build something to use the Whisper, that's the speech recognition backend of OpenAI. I said to use Whisper to take this whole conversation, separate out the voices for me and give me a transcript, like a text transcript. It took me very little time. It took about half an hour for me to create a piece of software that would take an audio input file, process the entire thing and give me a text transcript of the whole thing, which I then uploaded to Notebook LM. I then used the podcast generation that everybody is playing with, that people are having a ball with. I was able to take this whole thing and have these two co-hosts, these artificial intelligence hosts, have a discussion about what the three of us talked about. It's absolutely incredible that I was able to start from zero and create this thing in effectively about half an hour.
But that's what Altman was talking about. If you're building your business, hoping that you can cope with the inefficiencies of AI, and that's you can exist in those crevices, you're doomed. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
That sounds like, I hate that when people do that. But it really, let's say it's a bad strategy. If you want to be the next Otter, don't bother. If you want to be in business for 18 months, go for it. If you can raise a whole pile of investment in your idea and walk out with a few dollars in your pocket, go for it. But it's not going to be an enduring business. Businesses will be disrupted enormously. I'm not a conspiracy theory person, but I think a lot of people don't want to talk about this.
No, that has nothing to do with conspiracy theories. I think it's a normal human reaction. First of all, we're not built to think about the future beyond the very near future. We were built to think in terms of making sure that we had enough food to go for the meal for tomorrow. And then at some point it's planning for the tough winter and making it through until the springtime. We don't think in terms of exponential growth or exponential development. This is where I think it's difficult emotionally. One of the reasons that people have such a visceral reaction to this stuff, they see this as the great Satan walking onto the earth. AI is just this awful, horrible thing that is destroying our world. I could go on with the hyperbole, but here's the thing. It's hard for us as the apex of evolution on this planet. We're the most intelligent species. We're the most successful species. We're the apex predator. We're the apex thinker. We run the place. Okay. And all of a sudden, something that fits in the palm of my hand is now able to outthink me. It's a kind of the insult to us that is hard for people to get past, I think. It's like saying all of this brilliance that we have accumulated over centuries in books and in artwork is somehow reduced to an algorithm. The algorithm can spit out the sum total of human knowledge in a matter of seconds and recreate it, rebuild it, regenerate it, and imagine it a million different ways before we finished our breakfast. Like it hurts.
That's the fundamental misunderstanding. It's not an algorithm anymore. It is no longer something that we created solely. It is emerging. It will consist of behaviors we can't understand right. You pass the level where you're no longer in control of it. There's two levels of this to look at. There's the corporate level that says, what do I do about this? And the other is the personal level. And at the personal level, crap yourself, because we're going to be, nobody just draw some lines. Name me one time in evolutionary history that a more intelligent being has not dominated the less intelligent being. You just start to think about the idea of control. Sam Altman is busy trying to get all of our identities out there. We already have all our data out there. How easily are we controlled right now? There's a monumental social experiment happening. Nobody knows where that's going to go. The commercial piece, on the other hand, is more understandable in terms of what you can be doing with it now. And that's figuring out how you exploit it. The biggest piece is, how can I use this better than anybody else? You're not competing with it. You're competing with some other person or company that uses it.
I use that one as well, or a variation on that one. But the one that you're thinking about, and it, by the way, it's hard to pin down who said this first, but it's like AI will not replace people. People who use AI will replace people who don't.
I was hoping I could take credit for it. But
you might as well, because apparently I can't find the origin of it.
There you go. I remember saying this in 2003. No matter what we do, and you talk about this, humans can't picture the future very well. Thank God for science fiction, because William Gibson had it over all of us. This crazy sci-fi writer has had it all over us for decades. And if you want to read the future, go read science fiction, particularly from the mid-1990s.
I'm not even arguing with that one.
Just wrapping this up, interesting discussion. The idea of what I propose to companies is that they really need to do a strategy. They need to go and look at all of the things that they do and say, how many of these can I augment? And let's just put together some stuff to say, hey, here's all of the areas that are of a particular company. What can you do? I've started to augment that list by using AI models to tell me all the things you can do. Making a list and going through it and saying, could we try this? Is it better? You can get any sort of idea by playing. One of the things I hate doing is credit card statements. Every month I got to do this damn thing, and I hate doing it. I can scan them in now and say, you organize it and write me an expense report, and it will.
And this is actually a place where Notebook LM is a good idea, because Notebook LM doesn't take the information you've got and send it back to the cloud. So this is from a security perspective, Notebook LM is actually a good place to filter all that information because it stays local. All of it stays local. Companies I know still talk about this. I still like to throw the word innovation around. Innovation means that it isn't just coming up with new ideas. You have to explore and try things in order to come up with new ideas. And this isn't a turn this all over to artificial intelligence suggestion, but the suggestion is to find out whether something is going to be valuable for you or your business. It is important to have some understanding of what's out there and what that something can do for you. And a lot of these services are either free or have free tiers where you can start to explore with it. We talked a lot about how we got here and very little about what's actually here today and what we can do with some of the tools that we've got going forward. And these are things like audio and video and music and all sorts of other amazing things. But if you're going to innovate, you need to do research. You need to have your own little R&D department, even if that research and development department is somebody who's farting around for a couple of hours every week, trying out some new things and trying to see whether those new things stick. The old throwing the pasta against the wall and seeing if it sticks thing, to see whether there is value for you, is minimal. And you would be a fool not to take advantage of the computational power at your disposal that would have made anyone jealous even 20 years ago. It's there. It's in your hands. It's available for you. And I don't think there's any company out there, there's any person who's in business in any way, shape, or form who shouldn't be taking time to see how they can improve things, how they can go forward, because you're not going to predict the future. Okay. But you can ride the wave a little so you're not completely bowled over by it by the time the wave hits the shore. That's my surfing reference.
The old line about you can't predict the future, but you can invent it. You can at least ride with it and pretend you're inventing it. My favorite book in understanding where a big world goes is called Surfing at the Edge of Chaos, which I think is the most appropriate model for dealing with AI right now. Surfing at the edge of chaos and really being able to understand it, try it out, and do that. So next week, we'll all get together. John will have his voice back, and we will talk about how we can apply what we've got, what we want to do, or we'll talk about what we can apply with what's there now and what's in the near immediate future. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Just for the people who are playing with any of these things, I want to point out that Claude has just released a desktop application for Windows. So they have a standalone desktop application, and the standalone desktop application for ChatGPT now has advanced voice mode integrated into it. So you can actually chat real time from your desktop. I tried it just before we went on the air here. It is very cool.
And don't forget Notebook LM. It's well worth playing with. And this may be a return to the original culture. This Notebook LM is just an experiment, and it has blown the doors off anything Google's done in the past.
That's Google's way of saying don't get attached to it.
Yeah, we could beat you on a Friday afternoon. Okay, so
don't get attached even to Notebook LM.
No, because it'll disappear on you. But who knows? So, John, you contributed well to this. John Pinard, Mr. Marcel Gagné, and me, Jim Love. That's it. That's our conversation. And we're going to get back to this next week. And that's the first part of our discussion. I'd love to know what you thought. And if you have any comments or questions, love to hear them. You can always reach me at editorial@technewsday.ca, or as some listeners have, on LinkedIn. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a great weekend, and I'll be back with the tech news on Monday morning.